My mistress is pregnant. Leave.
My mistress is pregnant. Leave. Aurelius Vaughn did not raise his voice. He stood in front of the glass wall of his private office. The city stretched beneath him in steel and light. The skyline shimmered under the late evening haze, traffic crawling far below like veins carrying restless energy through the heart of the empire he built. His phone was still in his hand. The call had lasted less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes were enough to fracture a marriage. Serafina stood near the doorway. She had walked in quietly, intending to interrupt him gently, to ask if he had a moment. She had rehearsed her words all afternoon. She had imagined his expression softening. She had expected surprise, maybe even tears. Instead, she heard the end of her life as she knew it. He turned toward her slowly. His face carried no rage, no panic, no guilt, just decision. My mistress is pregnant, he repeated, as if clarifying a contract clause. You need to leave. There was no tremor in his tone, no hesitation. The skyline behind him looked endless, cold, untouchable. Serafina did not move. One hand drifted unconsciously to her lower stomach.
I need you to leave.
You're asking me to leave our home?
He noticed. He assumed nerves. He did not know. Before we go further, I need you to think about something. Have you ever walked into a room expecting love and walked out replaced? Would you fight, or would you walk away with your dignity intact? Welcome to Twisted Love Tales with Mr. Easton. If you are new here, subscribe now. These stories are not about wealth. They are about choices. They are about consequences. And tonight, you are about to witness one that almost destroyed a legacy. Tell me in the comments right now, if your husband said those words to you, would you stay or would you leave? Stay with me, because Aurelius Vaughn had no idea what he had just thrown away. Serafina did not gasp. She did not scream. She did not ask who the woman was. The silence between them expanded, heavy, but controlled. The kind of silence that arrives when something irreversible has just been spoken. You're asking me to leave our home? She asked. Her voice was steady, measured, almost gentle. Yes, that was all he gave her. No explanation, no apology, no visible conflict. She studied him carefully. The man who once stood barefoot in an unfinished penthouse kitchen, laughing as they ate takeout from cartons. The man who once told her she made success feel less lonely. Now he looked like a CEO finalizing a merger. Decisive, detached. If you have ever been dismissed without warning, you know this moment. Not the shouting, not the chaos, the calm, the way someone can erase you with a sentence. Tell me something. What hurts more, betrayal, or being discarded like you no longer matter? Because Aurelius did not accuse her of wrongdoing. He did not claim she failed him. He simply replaced her. Serafina felt it then. Not anger, not jealousy, something colder, final. Her fingers pressed lightly against her stomach again. This time, not from nerves. From instinct. He saw the movement. He misread it. He thought she was overwhelmed. He had no idea she was protecting something already growing inside her. He had no idea this was not just his wife standing in front of him. It was the mother of his heir. The phone call had come 10 minutes earlier. Colette's voice was not emotional. It was controlled, direct. I'm pregnant. No tears, no pleading, just information. Aurelius had remained silent for a full 5 seconds. In his world, 5 seconds felt like exposure. Risk. Liability. Are you certain? He asked. Yes. The answer was firm. His mind did not go to love. It did not go to fatherhood. It went to headlines, shareholder meetings, board whispers, market confidence. He had built everything on precision, control, reputation. He ended the call with one promise: I'll handle it. And in that moment, handling it meant eliminating uncertainty, which meant eliminating complication, which meant eliminating his wife. Fear often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you are choosing maturity. You convince yourself you are being practical. You frame it as damage control. But sometimes you are simply running. Aurelius turned from the window and faced Serafina fully. "She's carrying my child," he said again, slower this time, as if repetition made it honorable. "I will not deny that responsibility." He believed he was doing the right thing. He believed stepping toward one pregnancy required stepping away from another life. What he did not ask was whether there was already more truth in the room than he understood. He made a decision based on partial information, and partial information destroys entire futures. "Tell me honestly, when you are afraid of consequences, do you pause, or do you act first and think later?" Aurelius had already acted. Serafina walked further into the office. Not toward him. Toward the desk they had once chosen together. She remembered standing in this same space years ago while the penthouse was still unfinished. Concrete floors, open ceilings, possibility everywhere. He had asked her where the office should face. Toward the city, she told him. So you never forget who you're building for. Now the city was behind him, and she was the one being asked to leave. "How long?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "A few months." The answer landed between them like a sealed envelope. A few months. That was when the distance began. The late nights, the quiet dinners, the exhaustion he blamed on expansion. She closed her eyes briefly. Not to cry, to calculate. If Colette was only a few months along, her hand returned to her stomach again. 8 weeks. She had counted carefully. She had planned a quiet dinner tonight. Candles, his favorite wine, a small envelope across the table. Now she stood inside a different kind of announcement. "Tell me something. If you were carrying life inside you, and the father told you to leave, would you reveal it? Would you fight for your place? Or would you protect your pride?" Serafina lowered her hand slowly. "You've made your decision," she said. It was not a question. Aurelius nodded once. Cold, certain, final. He believed this conversation was ending a marriage. He did not realize it was exposing his character. Serafina did not argue. That unsettled him more than tears would have. She walked toward the coat stand near the door and picked up her handbag. Her movements were calm, controlled, the same composure she used when negotiating design revisions with stubborn architects. "You won't fight me?" he asked. She looked at him fully now. "I don't compete for space in my own marriage." The words were soft, but they cut clean. Aurelius exhaled slowly, mistaking her dignity for acceptance. He convinced himself she understood, that she saw the logic, that this was the mature path forward. He believed he was choosing responsibility. He believed he was correcting a mistake. He believed this was strength. Serafina placed her wedding ring on the edge of his desk. Not dramatically, not to provoke him, simply because she would not wear a promise he had already broken. For a brief second, his eyes flickered toward her stomach again. He almost asked. Almost, but pride silenced curiosity, and silence cost him everything. She opened the office door, paused, not to reconsider him, but to steady herself. Then she walked out. Aurelius Vaughn stood alone in front of the skyline he conquered, certain he had acted decisively, certain he had preserved his legacy, certain he had chosen the right child to protect. He did not know his wife was carrying his heir. 6 years earlier, Aurelius Vaughn was not yet untouchable. He was ambitious, disciplined, and building fast, but still personally involved in every decision tied to his first headquarters building. That afternoon, he stepped into the executive elevator carrying blueprints under his arm, reviewing cost projections on his tablet. The doors closed. At the next floor, a woman stepped in, balancing a portfolio case and a folder thick with structural notes. She pressed the button for the top level. The elevator jolted once, then stopped. The lights remained on, but the car froze between floors. Aurelius checked the panel. No movement. A mechanical voice announced a temporary delay. He exhaled, irritated. She did not panic. Instead, she leaned back against the wall and studied the architectural renderings visible on his screen. "That lobby ceiling will feel oppressive," she said calmly. He looked up, surprised. "Excuse me?" "The height is impressive," she continued, "but the lighting plan flattens it. You're building a headquarters. It should breathe." Most people treated him carefully, strategically. She critiqued him. The elevator remained suspended, between floors, between ascent and descent. For 25 minutes they were held in that narrow space, stripped of hierarchy, forced into conversation without exit. Later, Aurelius would remember that pause as the moment everything shifted. Not upward, not downward, just suspended, waiting. Her name was Serafina Vale, design consultant, brought in by the architectural firm to refine interior flow and spatial psychology. People underestimate how buildings shape behavior, she said as they waited. If you want innovation, designed for collaboration. If you want loyalty, designed for comfort. He studied her more carefully now. You think architecture determines culture? He asked. It influences it, she replied. Space tells people whether they matter. The statement lingered. Most executives spoke to him about scale, profit, dominance. She spoke about humanity. He challenged her assumptions, questioned her metrics, pressed for measurable outcomes. She countered with research, case studies, and quiet conviction. Their debate sharpened the air inside the elevator. Not hostile, focused. When the car finally lurched back to life and doors opened, neither of them moved immediately. You're Aurelius Vaughn, she said. Yes, I've reviewed your expansion model. And you build fast, efficient, impressive. He waited. But you don't build warmth. No one had framed his empire that way. He should have dismissed her. Instead, he asked, Are you free tomorrow to walk me through what you would change? She nodded once. The elevator had stalled, but something else had begun moving. The next afternoon, they stood inside the unfinished lobby. Concrete floors, exposed beams, open ceilings. Sunlight poured through temporary glass panels, casting clean lines across dust-covered surfaces. Serafina walked slowly through the space, heels echoing softly. Right here, she said, gesturing to the central atrium. You're emphasizing height over intimacy. He folded his arms. It's meant to inspire. Inspiration without connection feels cold, she replied. She sketched adjustments directly onto the blueprint. Softer seating zones, warmer materials, breakout areas near executive offices instead of isolating them on a separate floor. You want employees to feel seen, she continued. Design signals that. Aurelius watched her speak, not just listening to the content but to the certainty behind it. You talk about buildings like they're people, he observed. They are, she said. They hold stories. He had always approached construction as strategy, as statement. She approached it as experience. Their debate stretched past the scheduled hour. Workers began packing tools while they were still discussing sight lines and foot traffic patterns. For the first time in months, Aurelius forgot about quarterly projections. He was engaged, challenged, interested. When she closed her portfolio, he did not want the conversation to end. Dinner, he said. Continue arguing with me over food. She hesitated only briefly. Fine, she replied. But I'm not losing. He almost smiled. The restaurant was small, not one of his usual corporate venues. No private room, no reservations under his assistant's name. They waited 10 minutes for a table near the window. Conversation shifted away from architecture and into childhood, education, ambition. She grew up in a modest neighborhood where space was scarce and privacy rare. She learned early how environments affected mood, how clutter created stress, how light altered emotion. He grew up inside expectation, every achievement measured, every failure magnified. You chase permanence, she observed over dinner. Why? He considered the question seriously. Because nothing I grew up with felt secure, he admitted. That answer surprised even him. She did not pity him. She did not soften her gaze. She understood. Dinner stretched longer than intended. Neither checked the time. When the bill arrived, neither reached for it first. It felt unplanned, uncalculated. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the city moved around them with its usual urgency. But between them, something slowed. You're different outside of boardrooms, she said. And you're different outside elevators, he replied. She laughed quietly. It was the first time he noticed how easily she carried lightness. Months later, their relationship was no longer theoretical. It was real. He began staying at her apartment after late meetings. She would order takeout at midnight because neither of them remembered to eat earlier. They sat cross-legged on the floor, cartons open between them, reviewing building drafts while sharing stories. He spoke about expansion plans. She asked whether growth always required sacrifice. Sacrifice of what? He asked. Time, presence, yourself. He brushed it off then. Ambition required trade-offs. But when she leaned her head against his shoulder, he felt something unfamiliar. Peace. He was used to admiration, to alliances built on advantage. With her, he did not perform. He did not posture. He spoke plainly. Once, around 1:30 a.m., she traced a finger along a line on his blueprint. You design for impact, she said softly. But don't forget to design for rest. He looked at her, illuminated by nothing more than the kitchen light. You make success feel less heavy, he admitted. She smiled. He did not yet understand how rare that feeling was. When he purchased the penthouse, it was empty. Raw floors, bare walls, wide windows overlooking the city. He brought her there before the furniture arrived. They stood barefoot in the center of the living room, surrounded by open space. This is where the piano goes, she said, pointing toward the window. I don't play, he replied. You'll learn. She walked through the kitchen area, mapping it out with her imagination. This should stay open. No dividing walls. You'll need room to breathe. He watched her move through the emptiness, as if it were already alive. Later that evening, music drifted faintly from a phone speaker. She extended her hand. Dance with me. There's no furniture, he said. Exactly. They moved slowly across unfinished floors, laughing when their steps misaligned. There was no audience, no expectation, only the quiet promise of building something together. For Aurelius, who had spent his life chasing structures that would outlast him, this moment felt different. Less about legacy, more about belonging. One night, after closing his first major international deal, he arrived at the penthouse past midnight. He expected her to be asleep. Instead, she was sitting on the floor near the window, sketchbook open, city lights reflecting in the glass. You did it, she said without looking up. The expansion. He nodded, loosening his tie. It should feel bigger than this. She closed the sketchbook and stood. Success doesn't always shout, she said. Sometimes it's quiet. He walked toward her slowly. I've spent years proving myself, he admitted. Outrunning doubt, outbuilding competition. And now, he looked at her, really looked. Now I don't feel alone doing it. The words slipped out before he could analyze them. She stepped closer. That's because you stopped building walls and started building with someone. He kissed her forehead gently. At that moment, he believed what they had was permanent, unshakable. Which is why what comes next will hurt even more. Success accelerated faster than either of them anticipated. Within 2 years of launching his headquarters, Aurelius secured contracts across 3 major cities. Investors multiplied. Expectations intensified. Every decision carried greater consequence. Growth no longer felt exciting. It felt urgent. Board meetings stretched late into the evening. Market fluctuations dictated his mood. His calendar filled weeks in advance. Assistants managed every minute. At first, Serafina admired the discipline. You always wanted this, she reminded him one night, as he reviewed financial reports at the dining table. I did, he replied, eyes fixed on projections. And I can't slow down now. That sentence marked the shift. He stopped attending weekday dinners. He began eating in his office. He replaced spontaneous walks with conference calls. Expansion demanded precision. Precision demanded time. Time became scarce. He justified the changes as temporary. Once this phase stabilized, he would recalibrate. Once the next acquisition closed, he would rest. But ambition rarely pauses after reaching a milestone. It simply sets a higher one. Serafina adjusted quietly. She moved her sketchbooks to the living room instead of the dining table. She waited up less often. She told herself this was a season, not a transformation. Still, she noticed something subtle. He no longer looked at her when he entered a room. He scanned for problems instead. Colette Duval entered during a restructuring phase. She was sharp, efficient, and direct. Her resume reflected aggressive turnarounds and disciplined cost control. She spoke the language of urgency fluently. Aurelius hired her after a tense board presentation. She understands momentum, he told Serafina casually one evening. No distractions. Colette matched his pace. She challenged executives without hesitation. She remained in meetings long after others grew fatigued. She anticipated objections before they surfaced. Where Serafina asked about culture, Colette asked about margins. Where Serafina softened his edges, Colette sharpened them. They began working closely. Late-night strategy sessions, crisis simulations, travel logistics. Serafina met her once at a company function. Colette's handshake was firm, her smile brief, her eyes observant. She seems capable, Serafina said afterward. She is, Aurelius replied. That's why she's here. There was no flirtation, no visible boundary crossed, just proximity, just shared pressure, just two professionals aligned on performance. Yet subtle shifts began forming. He started quoting Colette's assessments at home, comparing strategies, reframing decisions through her lens. Serafina listened without comment. What unsettled her was not admiration, it was alignment. Colette operated in the world Aurelius was choosing more often, and Serafina felt herself standing slightly outside it. Travel intensified. Chicago, Miami, San Francisco. Negotiations demanded presence. Investors preferred face-to-face reassurance. Colette accompanied him on nearly every trip. Hotel conference rooms replaced office spaces. Midnight contract revisions became routine. Room service trays accumulated while spreadsheets glowed on screens. Aurelius called home at first. Short updates. We closed the deal. Landing tomorrow. Don't wait up. As weeks passed, calls shortened further. Sometimes messages replaced them. Serafina watched his flights through shared calendar notifications. She noted departure times, arrival cities, estimated returns. The penthouse felt larger when he was gone. Silence expanded in corners where conversation once lived. She told herself this was part of leadership. Travel builds empires. Sacrifice precedes reward. Still, one evening as she set 2 plates out of habit and returned one to the cabinet, she felt the absence differently. Not dramatic, not loud, just consistent. Distance does not announce itself with chaos. It grows through repetition. He returned from trips exhausted. She greeted him with warmth. He hugged her briefly before reviewing emails. Jet lag replaced intimacy. Performance replaced presence. Neither accused the other, but something delicate was thinning. It began with small things. A call she placed at 9:15 p.m. No answer. A text asking if he landed safely. Response at midnight. Busy. Talk tomorrow. Tomorrow became a flexible word. She started hesitating before dialing, calculating whether he was in a meeting, whether interruption would irritate him. Once, during a client dinner, his phone lit up with her name. Colette noticed. "Should you take that?" she asked. "It can wait," he replied. That sentence carried more weight than he realized. It can wait. Conversations that once felt immediate now felt optional. He convinced himself he was protecting focus. Serafina convinced herself she was respecting his ambition. They were both adapting. One night, she left him a voice message, not dramatic, just simple. "I hope the meeting goes well. Call me when you can." He listened to it hours later in a taxi, fatigue pressing against his temples. He meant to respond. He forgot. The next morning, she did not mention it. She began adjusting her expectations downward, lowering the volume of her needs. Missed calls became normal. Normal can quietly reshape a marriage. When he was home, nights felt different. They lay side by side beneath dim light, the city glowing beyond the windows. He scrolled through market updates. She turned onto her side, watching the outline of his face. He used to reach for her instinctively, a hand across her waist, a slow conversation before sleep. Now exhaustion claimed him quickly. "Long day," he murmured, already closing his eyes. She nodded. Yes. The space between their bodies widened by inches. Not deliberate, just gradual. Physical distance rarely begins with rejection. It begins with distraction. Once, she traced her fingers lightly across his arm. He responded absently, pulling her closer without fully waking. The gesture felt automatic, not intentional. She missed the version of him who lingered, Who asked about her designs? Who debated ideas until midnight? She told herself this phase would pass. He told himself he was building security for their future. Neither acknowledged the quiet ache forming between them. Silence settled at the edge of their bed each night. Not hostile, but heavy. Serafina did not confront him immediately. She observed. He stopped asking about her projects in detail. He forgot the name of a client she mentioned twice. He canceled a weekend brunch due to an emergency call. Individually, each absence was minor. Together, they formed a pattern. She watched how he entered rooms now, phone in hand, mind already elsewhere. She studied his posture during dinner, leaning back, detached. One evening she asked gently, "Are you happy?" He looked surprised. "Of course. With us?" He hesitated just long enough for her to notice. "Yes. I'm just tired." Tired. A reasonable answer. But she sensed something else. Not betrayal. Not yet. But retreat. He was withdrawing into a world defined by performance and control. She could not compete with that world. And she refused to. Instead, she shifted her energy inward, focused on her own work, her own independence. If he needed space, she would not cling. Dignity requires restraint. Still, when she lay awake some nights listening to his even breathing, she wondered whether ambition always demands emotional cost, or whether they were simply failing to protect what once felt effortless. It happened unexpectedly. He returned from a trip earlier than planned. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. The city lights blurred through the glass. She was in the kitchen when he entered, sleeves rolled up, preparing tea. He stood there longer than usual, watching her. "You look tired," she said softly. "I am." She moved closer, studying his face. "You're losing yourself," she told him. The statement was not accusation, it was concern. He exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering. "For months I've been pushing," he admitted. "Trying to stay ahead." "And what are you ahead of?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Not hurried, not distracted, present. He held her like someone who suddenly realized what could slip away. The rain grew heavier outside. Inside, something shifted. They talked that night. Honestly, about pressure, about fear, about exhaustion. He apologized for being absent. She admitted she felt overlooked. There were no raised voices, just recognition. When he kissed her, it was deliberate, not out of habit, out of choice. That evening unfolded slowly. They moved to the living room first, sitting close on the sofa, while rain filled the background. Conversation softened into quiet closeness. He brushed her hair back gently. "I forgot how calm it feels with you," he said. She searched his eyes. "Then don't forget again." Their intimacy was not fueled by urgency. It was grounded in relief. He traced his fingers along her spine carefully, as if reacquainting himself with her presence. She leaned into him without hesitation. The penthouse felt warm again. Not from lighting, from connection. They made their way to the bedroom gradually, laughter breaking tension. There was no performance, no expectation, only rediscovery. He kissed her with intention, slower than before. She responded with equal steadiness. The distance of recent months seemed suspended for that night, not erased, but quiet. He held her afterward, forehead resting against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "I'm here," she replied. Neither realized how significant that night would become. Weeks later, Serafina stood in their bathroom holding a small white test strip. 2 lines. Clear. Certain. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, hand resting over her mouth as emotion rose gently through her. Not panic. Not fear. Hope. She calculated dates carefully. That night, the rain. The reconnection. She pressed her palm against her abdomen instinctively. A quiet smile formed. This child was conceived in reconciliation, not distance. She imagined telling him. A private dinner. Candles lit. His favorite wine breathing on the counter. A folded card across his plate. She pictured his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to joy. For the first time in months, anticipation filled her. Perhaps this was what they needed, a reminder of what mattered. "Before we move forward, I want you to pause. Do you think distance always means betrayal? Or is it sometimes fear wearing a different face? Tell me what you believe in the comments. Because Serafina planned to tell him. She planned everything carefully. But she never got the chance. She planned to tell him. He confessed first. The conversation did not happen in a dramatic setting. It happened inside a private conference room after a long negotiation session. The contracts were signed. The investors satisfied. The room nearly empty. Colette remained seated while others exited. She closed her folder slowly, her posture composed. I need a moment, she said. Aurelius paused, sensing something unusual in her tone. When the door shut behind the last executive, she met his eyes directly. I went to the doctor yesterday. He waited. I'm pregnant. No tremor. No hesitation. Information delivered with the same precision she used in meetings. For a second, he thought he misunderstood. With my child? He asked. Yes. Silence filled the room. He did not react emotionally. His face remained steady, controlled. Inside, calculation began immediately. Dates. Exposure. Implications. Colette did not ask what he intended to do. She did not plead. I thought you should know, she said. He nodded once. The partnership they built on strategy now carried consequence. In that moment, Aurelius did not think about love. He thought about fallout. By the time he reached his car, his mind was already constructing scenarios. If the news surfaced publicly, the media would not separate personal life from leadership. Investors would question judgment. Board members would reassess confidence. He had positioned himself as disciplined, strategic, controlled. A scandal involving a mistress and a pregnancy would fracture that image. He pictured headlines speculating about ethics. He imagined interviews probing his personal stability. Reputation, once compromised, spreads quickly. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The issue was not only moral, it was corporate. He had shareholders to protect, employees depending on stability, expansion plans mid-execution. He framed the situation as responsibility. If a child was coming, he would not deny it. He would step forward. But stepping forward required eliminating contradiction. A wife at home. A child elsewhere. Public scrutiny would intensify the conflict. His solution formed gradually but firmly. Resolve the inconsistency. Contain the damage. Protect the brand. He convinced himself he was thinking rationally. He did not examine what he was abandoning emotionally. To him, this was crisis management, not betrayal. Fear does not always appear as panic. Sometimes it appears as urgency. Aurelius spent that evening reviewing public relations protocols. He contacted his legal advisor discreetly under the pretense of updating estate documents. What exposure am I facing? He asked carefully. The advisor spoke in measured tones about media patterns, confidentiality clauses, and strategic announcements. Nothing was certain, but nothing was harmless either. He imagined shareholders questioning his focus, rivals using personal instability to weaken negotiations. He built his empire on perception as much as performance. Perception now felt vulnerable. He drove home later than usual. The penthouse lights were on. He paused before entering, rehearsing the conversation. He would be direct, decisive. He would assume responsibility for the unborn child. He would prevent emotional chaos from spilling into corporate structure. Fear whispered that delay would complicate matters. Fear insisted action was strength. He did not pause long enough to consider whether fear was steering him. He stepped inside prepared to restructure his life with the same efficiency he applied to mergers. He had already chosen. He just had not spoken it yet. When Serafina entered his office that night, he had already resolved what he would say. He could have softened the truth. He could have confessed uncertainty. Instead, he delivered finality. My mistress is pregnant. Leave. There was no apology in his tone. No visible regret. He stood tall, shoulders squared, as if defending a strategic position. Serafina searched his face for hesitation. She found none. You're choosing her? She asked quietly. I'm choosing responsibility, he replied. That was pride speaking. Responsibility framed as moral superiority. He told himself he was protecting the unborn child. He did not acknowledge that he was also protecting himself. Protecting image, protecting control. Serafina's composure unsettled him. She did not collapse. She did not accuse. She did not compete. "I will not beg for space in my own marriage," she said. The sentence did not rise in volume, but it carried clarity. Aurelius felt a brief flicker of discomfort. Then he suppressed it. He believed strength required firmness. He believed wavering would weaken authority. In choosing pride over love, he mistook rigidity for leadership. And he sealed a decision that would soon cost him more than reputation. The office felt colder after the words settled. Serafina stood near the doorway, one hand resting near her abdomen. He noticed the gesture again. "Are you unwell?" he asked. "No," she replied. He interpreted her steadiness as agreement. "You can stay elsewhere temporarily," he continued. "I will ensure you're financially secure." There it was. Compensation instead of conversation, arrangement instead of remorse. She looked around the room slowly. The desk they selected together. The city view she encouraged him to face. "You're asking me to disappear quietly," she said. "I'm asking you to understand the situation." The phrasing revealed everything. Understand, adjust, comply. She studied him carefully, memorizing the distance in his eyes. For a moment, he expected resistance. Instead, she nodded once. "If that is your decision," she said, "then I won't argue." He mistook restraint for acceptance. He did not realize it was dignity drawing a boundary. As she turned toward the door, Aurelius felt a brief impulse to call her back. He remained silent, because silence preserved authority, or so he believed. Serafina walked through the penthouse slowly, not to delay, to absorb. The living room where they danced barefoot. The kitchen where midnight conversations unfolded. The bedroom where reconciliation brought hope weeks earlier. She did not cry. Her breathing remained steady. He followed at a distance, uncertain whether to speak again. "You don't have to move tonight," he offered stiffly. "I do," she replied. Her tone remained composed. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. He stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid. No shouting filled the space. No dramatic confrontation, only quiet finality. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, she stepped forward without looking back. Aurelius remained inside for several seconds after the doors closed again. He expected relief. Instead, the silence pressed heavier than before. He returned upstairs to an empty home. The absence did not feel victorious. It felt unresolved. Still, he convinced himself he had chosen the mature path. He had taken responsibility. He had acted decisively. He ignored the truth that strength without compassion becomes cruelty. Serafina returned briefly the next morning while he was at work. The penthouse felt foreign. She moved through each room collecting only essentials: clothing, personal documents, her sketchbooks. She left the furniture untouched. She left framed photographs on the walls. She folded garments carefully, not rushing. Each item carried memory. Each memory demanded restraint. She paused in the nursery space they once discussed, but never furnished. Her hand rested against her stomach instinctively. 8 weeks. She closed her eyes briefly, not in grief, in resolve. This child would not grow up in uncertainty. She packed one final suitcase and stood in the center of the bedroom. The closet door remained open. His suits aligned perfectly inside. She did not disturb them. Some departures are loud. This one was measured. By the time Aurelius returned that evening, her belongings were gone. No dramatic note waited on the counter, only absence, and the quiet proof that she meant every word she spoke. She did not remove her wedding ring immediately. She kept it on during the drive away, during the first night in a temporary rental property. During the morning, she contacted a real estate attorney discreetly. But later, while standing alone in the bathroom of her new space, she studied it carefully. The band was simple, elegant. He had chosen it thoughtfully. She traced the edge once with her thumb. Marriage to her was partnership, shared direction, mutual protection. The ring symbolized unity, and unity had been dismissed without discussion. She slid it off slowly, not with anger, with clarity. She placed it inside a small velvet box and set it inside a drawer, not discarded, but removed, a boundary drawn quietly. She would not wear a symbol of commitment while standing alone. The gesture felt heavier than shouting would have. It was not revenge. It was acknowledgement. The marriage, as it existed, was no longer intact. She pressed her palm gently over her abdomen again. This ring may come off, but this child remained. Aurelius waited 3 days before attempting contact. His message was brief. I hope you're settled. Let me know if you need anything. She read it without responding. He assumed distance meant adjustment. He believed time would soften the transition. He did not know she had already scheduled her first prenatal appointment alone. She considered telling him. More than once. She drafted a message in her mind. I'm pregnant, your child. But each time, she paused. Not because she wanted revenge, because she refused to beg for acknowledgement. If he chose responsibility once, he would need to choose it again. Freely. Not manipulated. Not forced. She would not compete with another pregnancy. She would not plead for validation. Instead, she focused on stability, doctor visits, nutritional plans, property arrangements. Strength replaced heartbreak. Meanwhile, Aurelius prepared public statements regarding future transitions in his personal life. He believed the most complicated truth had already surfaced. He was wrong, because while he structured narratives for the world outside, he remained unaware of the life growing quietly beyond his sight. Serafina chose quiet, not exile, not escape. Quiet. 3 hours outside the city, a small lakeside town offered privacy without spectacle. She purchased the property through a holding company to avoid attention. The house itself was modest compared to the penthouse she left behind. White exterior, wide porch, tall windows facing open water, no skyline, no glass towers, just stillness. The first morning she woke there, sunlight stretched gently across wooden floors. No traffic noise filtered through the walls. No elevator hum echoed in the background. She stood by the lake barefoot, hands resting lightly over her abdomen. The air smelled clean, uncomplicated. She did not cry. She did not replay the argument. She focused forward. Security systems were installed within days. Legal paperwork transferred discreetly. She arranged medical care in a nearby private clinic. This relocation was not dramatic. It was deliberate. She was not running from humiliation. She was choosing stability. Aurelius built upward toward visibility. She built inward toward protection. The difference marked the beginning of 2 entirely separate worlds. The smallest room in the lakeside house faced the water. Serafina decided immediately it would become the nursery. She did not hire an interior team. She painted the walls herself, soft cream, neutral, warm, without excess. Each brushstroke steadied her thoughts. There was something grounding about preparing space for someone who had not yet arrived. She assembled the crib slowly, following instructions with patient focus. She selected curtains that allowed morning light to filter through gently. She avoided excess. She chose intention. A rocking chair sat near the window. A small bookshelf rested against the far wall. She placed a single framed sketch above the crib, a simple drawing of intertwined branches forming a circle. Protection. Continuity. She did not imagine confrontation scenes while decorating. She did not dwell on what Aurelius should have done differently. She concentrated on what she could control. Environment, safety, calm. As she stepped back to study the room one evening, her hand rested against her growing stomach again. This is yours, she whispered softly. Not as possession, as promise. She would build this child's foundation without resentment shaping the walls. The first prenatal appointment felt heavier than expected. The clinic was quiet, professional, discreet. She filled out paperwork calmly, leaving the section marked partner information partially blank. Inside the examination room, the doctor reviewed early scans. Everything appears healthy, he said reassuringly. She exhaled slowly. Relief settled gently through her. When the heartbeat echoed faintly through the monitor, she gripped the edge of the table lightly. It was real. Strong, alive. There was no hand to squeeze beside her, no shared glance of disbelief, just her, and the steady rhythm on the screen. After the appointment, she walked along the lake before driving home. The water reflected sunlight in quiet ripples. She allowed herself one moment of vulnerability. A single tear slid down her cheek. Not from sorrow alone. From magnitude. Life was forming. Responsibility was expanding. She wiped her face gently and continued walking. Independence did not mean isolation. It meant composure. She would attend every appointment prepared. She would ask every question thoroughly. She would not let absence define the experience. Strength can be soft. It does not need applause. Serafina refused to speak Aurelius's name with hostility. When friends asked cautiously about her situation, she answered simply, "We are separated." No elaboration, no public narrative. She declined invitations to gossip. Bitterness requires energy. She conserved hers. Her days developed rhythm. Morning walks, design consultations conducted remotely, afternoon rest, evening planning. She maintained financial independence without requesting support. Her career remained intact. Her confidence remained steady. When she reviewed legal documents concerning marital property, she made practical decisions without dramatics. Fair distribution. Clear terms. She did not aim to punish him. She aimed to protect herself. Late at night, when the house settled into silence, she sometimes placed both hands over her abdomen and spoke softly about the future. "You will not inherit confusion," she murmured. She chose dignity over spectacle. She chose composure over chaos. Meanwhile, in a city built on speed and visibility, Aurelius navigated a very different atmosphere. Aurelius adapted quickly to public alignment with Colette. Corporate dinners placed her at his side. Industry events displayed them together, under controlled lighting and polished conversation. She wore professionalism like armor. He wore confidence like habit. Investors noticed the transition but did not question it openly. "She's an asset," one board member remarked approvingly. Asset. The word felt efficient. During speeches, Aurelius spoke about expansion goals and forward momentum. Applause followed strategy. Cameras flashed briefly. From the outside, his life appeared stable, focused, managed. Yet during quieter moments between courses, when conversation thinned, he sometimes caught himself scanning the room instinctively, as if expecting someone else to be there. Colette discussed quarterly forecasts while reviewing notes beside him. She matched his pace seamlessly. No emotional friction, no vulnerability. Their partnership functioned smoothly in professional settings. But when events ended and drivers returned him to the penthouse, the silence that followed felt heavier than applause. Public alignment does not guarantee private comfort. He was beginning to sense the difference. The penthouse remained immaculate. Staff maintained order. Lighting adjusted automatically. The city skyline remained impressive. But warmth had shifted. Her sketchbooks were gone. The kitchen felt unused. The living room, once filled with casual conversations, felt curated instead of lived in. He walked through each space one evening after returning from an event. His footsteps echoed more than he remembered. He opened the closet and noticed empty sections where her clothing once hung. He stood there longer than necessary. He expected satisfaction from decisive action. Instead, he felt displacement. He told himself this was adjustment. Change requires time. He poured a drink and sat alone at the dining table built for two. Across the city, headlines focused on mergers and market forecasts. Inside his home, quiet lingered. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just persistent. Absence is rarely loud. It is consistent. He tried filling evenings with additional work. Conference calls extended past midnight. Yet each time he returned to an empty bedroom, he felt something missing that success could not replace. The silence felt strongest at 1 a.m. That hour once belonged to them. Late conversations, shared ideas, unfiltered thoughts. Now, at that same hour, Aurelius often stood near the window overlooking the city. His phone remained still. No message from her. No call. He considered reaching out more than once. He typed short messages. Deleted them. Pride restrained vulnerability. Across the lake, Serafina prepared herbal tea before bed. She arranged prenatal vitamins neatly on the kitchen counter. She moved with quiet intention. 2 separate spaces. 2 separate routines. He convinced himself she was adjusting comfortably. He did not know she attended appointments alone. He did not know the nursery walls were already painted. He did not know how steady she had become. The distance between them expanded not through conflict, but through unshared realities. Until one afternoon, a call from his legal advisor interrupted his assumptions. The meeting was brief. Estate planning adjustments required review due to the anticipated child with Colette. His legal advisor spoke professionally, flipping through documentation. "There is one matter you should be aware of," the advisor said carefully. Aurelius looked up. "Your wife declined financial support." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "She refused the settlement allocation offered during preliminary separation terms. She requested no spousal maintenance." The word settled differently than expected. "Declined. No request for compensation. No leverage. No negotiation. She's entitled to it," he said quietly. "Yes." She chose not to pursue it. For the first time since the separation, uncertainty replaced certainty. Why refuse security? Why refuse leverage? Was it strength? Was it pride? Or was it heartbreak beyond negotiation? Before we continue, I want you to consider something. If someone walks away without taking a single dollar, what does that say? Is refusing money strength, pride, or heartbreak? Tell me what you believe. Because that sentence destabilized Aurelius more than any headline ever could. The meeting at the private medical complex was routine. Aurelius needed to finalize property documents related to an investment portfolio adjustment. The clinic shared facilities with several professional offices, and he gave little thought to the location when scheduling the appointment. He signed the final page, shook hands, and exited toward the covered parking structure. Late afternoon light filtered between concrete beams. The air carried the faint scent of rain that had passed earlier. He checked his phone while walking, scanning emails. Then he heard a car door close. The sound drew his attention upward. A woman stepped carefully out of a dark sedan 2 rows ahead. She moved slower than he remembered her moving. He recognized the posture first, then the profile. Serafina. For a moment his mind refused to connect the image with reality. She wore a soft gray dress that draped differently than before. Her hair was longer, pulled loosely over one shoulder. Her expression was composed. She placed one hand against the car door for balance before straightening. He took a step forward without realizing it. She turned slightly. Their eyes met across the structure. Time did not freeze. It narrowed. There was no audience, no dramatic entrance, no preparation, just proximity. He noticed something immediately. The way the fabric curved gently outward at her midsection. His breath slowed. He walked toward her, each step heavier than the last. Serafina did not look startled. She looked prepared, as if she had imagined this moment before. "Hello, Aurelius," she said calmly. He stopped several feet away, uncertain how close he was allowed to stand. "You're here," he said unnecessarily. "Yes." Her voice carried no accusation. He tried to focus on her face, but his eyes drifted downward. The curve was unmistakable, not subtle, not imagined. Her dress followed the rounded shape of a pregnancy that had advanced beyond early uncertainty. He felt a tightening in his chest. "How long?" he asked quietly. She did not rush her answer. 20 weeks. The number struck him harder than he expected. 20 weeks. 5 months. Halfway. His mind began calculating without permission. 5 months. He replayed timelines in silence. 20 weeks ago. Rain. Reconnection. The night in the living room. The conversation in the kitchen. The way he held her, as if afraid of losing her. His throat felt dry. "Is it?" He stopped himself, then forced the question out. "Is it mine?" She did not flinch. "You were the only man in my life." The words landed with clarity. No ambiguity, no room for doubt. His heart began pounding harder than during any boardroom negotiation. He was not prepared for this, not because he feared responsibility, but because he understood what it meant. He had miscalculated everything. He stepped closer slowly, as if approaching something fragile. The space between them shortened, but not enough to erase the distance that had grown over months. Her hand rested naturally along the side of her abdomen. Protective. Instinctive. He noticed how the movement was unconscious now. Familiar to her body. "How are you feeling?" he asked. It sounded inadequate the moment it left his mouth. Healthy, she replied. The baby is healthy. The baby. Not an idea. Not a possibility. A life progressing. He looked at her again. Truly looked. There was no bitterness in her eyes. No visible anger. Just steadiness. You didn't tell me, he said, and even as he spoke it, he realized the accusation was misplaced. You made your decision, she answered evenly. The simplicity of it unsettled him, more than shouting would have. He replayed the night he told her to leave. Her composure, her hand resting near her stomach. He had seen the gesture. He had ignored it. Now that small detail returned, with weight. He felt heat rise behind his eyes, a rare physical reaction he could not control. You were already pregnant, he murmured. Yes. The confirmation crushed the last layer of denial. He had not just ended a marriage. He had dismissed a woman carrying his child. 20 weeks meant milestones. Appointments, ultrasounds, first movements. He realized he had missed half of it. Have you? He struggled for phrasing. Have you been alone through this? I have been capable, she replied. The distinction mattered. Not alone in weakness, alone in strength. He imagined her in a clinic room, listening to a heartbeat without him beside her. He imagined her preparing a nursery without his knowledge. Each image tightened something inside him. I would have been there, he said quietly. She met his gaze. Would you? The question held no sarcasm, only truth. 20 weeks ago, he chose responsibility for another pregnancy. He chose fear over conversation. He chose image over intimacy. The timeline stood undeniable. Colette's announcement, his decision, Serafina's departure, all within the same window. He ran numbers again in his head, as if recalculating could undo reality. It could not. This child had been conceived before Colette ever spoke her news. The order mattered. He leaned slightly against a concrete pillar, steadying himself. The world he believed he was managing now felt unstable. His control had been illusion. He closed his eyes briefly, forcing the timeline into clarity. 20 weeks. That meant she was 8 weeks pregnant when he asked her to leave. 8 weeks. The early stage when fear and hope coexist. The stage when a woman waits to share the news carefully. He remembered her planning a quiet dinner that week. Candles on the table when he walked in. Her calm expression. He had interrupted it with finality. My mistress is pregnant. Leave. The memory echoed differently now. He had spoken over his own future. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice lower than before. She considered him for a long moment. Because I will not beg for space in my own marriage, she said. The repetition of her earlier words struck harder in this setting. She did not hide the truth to punish him. She withheld it because dignity demanded it. He felt something fracture internally. Not reputation, not ego, self-perception. He prided himself on precision, on foresight, on calculated leadership. Yet he failed at the most personal equation of his life. He misread the variables. He assumed he had full information. He acted decisively. And he was wrong. Completely. The parking structure felt quieter now. Distant engines hummed somewhere above them. Serafina adjusted her bag strap over her shoulder. I have an appointment, she said gently. I should go. The simplicity of her tone intensified the moment. He wanted to ask for forgiveness. He wanted to undo months with a single sentence. Instead, he stood still. Serafina, he said softly. She paused. I didn't know. I know, she replied. Not as absolution, as fact. He watched her walk toward the clinic entrance, her steps careful but steady. The curve of her belly remained visible until the doors closed behind her. He remained rooted in place long after she disappeared. The truth settled in layers. He had chosen another woman out of fear. He had dismissed his wife out of pride. He had structured his life around control, and control had betrayed him. This child existed before his crisis calculation, before his declaration, before his arrogance. He inhaled slowly, but the air felt heavy. There was no audience to witness his realization, no applause, no defense, only clarity. He had thrown away his wife while she was carrying his heir. Aurelius did not delay. The morning after seeing Serafina in the parking structure, he requested a private meeting with Colette. Not in a conference room, not during a strategy session, In his office, door closed. No assistance. She noticed the shift immediately. "You saw her," Colette said before he spoke. "Yes." Silence followed. Colette's composure remained intact, but her eyes sharpened slightly. "She's pregnant," he said. "I assumed that might be the case," she replied. There was no visible surprise. "She's 20 weeks, he continued. "The timeline overlaps." Colette leaned back slowly in her chair. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying, I made a decision based on incomplete truth. I acted out of fear." He did not soften the admission. "I will take responsibility for our child," he added firmly. "But I cannot continue this relationship." The words were steady, not apologetic, not aggressive, clear. Colette studied him for several long seconds. "You're choosing her. I'm choosing accountability," he replied. The distinction mattered to him. He did not blame her. He did not diminish what had occurred between them. "I won't disappear from my child's life," he said. "But I won't continue building something that began in confusion." Colette nodded once. "You should have thought of that earlier." "Yes," he answered. No defense, no excuse. The partnership ended without spectacle, but consequence remained. Ending the relationship did not mean abandoning responsibility. Aurelius arranged legal and financial structures immediately to ensure Colette's child would be secure. Trust accounts were drafted, educational provisions outlined, long-term care established. He met with Colette again, this time strictly to discuss the future of their child. "You will not have to ask for anything," he said. "I will be present." She folded her arms carefully. "Present means more than payments." "I know." For the first time, his voice carried weight beyond strategy. He would attend medical appointments when invited. He would not contest paternity. He would not retreat into silence. Responsibility required consistency. This was not about public image now. It was about character. He understood something clearly in those meetings. One mistake does not justify another. He could repair one path without erasing the existence of another child. Accountability meant standing in every consequence, not selectively. He signed documents without hesitation, arranged schedules, agreed to transparent co-parenting plans. There was no romance left between them, only structure and commitment. As he left the final meeting with Colette, he felt the weight of his choices settle differently. He was no longer reacting. He was deciding, but the most difficult conversation still awaited him by the lake. He drove to the lakeside house without notifying her in advance. Not to intimidate, to show up. The property looked smaller in person than he imagined, simpler, quiet, surrounded by water instead of glass towers. He stood at the door longer than necessary before knocking. When Serafina opened it, her expression did not change. "I needed to speak with you," he said. "You could have called," she replied. "I know." She stepped aside after a pause. The interior reflected her influence. Warm wood tones, soft light, clean lines without excess. He noticed subtle changes immediately. The house felt intentional, grounded. "I ended things with Colette," he said plainly. She absorbed the statement without visible reaction. "I will take responsibility for her child," he continued, "but I cannot continue that relationship." "And now?" she asked. "Now I am asking for a conversation." Her gaze held steady. "About what?" "About what I destroyed." The honesty shifted the air between them. He did not demand forgiveness. He did not assume reconciliation. He simply asked to be heard. She moved toward the living room and sat carefully. He remained standing for a moment before sitting across from her. There was no penthouse skyline here, no boardroom posture. Just two people confronting the truth. The lake beyond the windows reflected late afternoon light. Serafina folded her hands gently over her abdomen. "You chose fear over truth," she said calmly. He did not interrupt. "You assumed the worst before asking questions. You calculated headlines before you looked at me." Her words were not raised. They were precise. "I know," he answered. "You chose image over love." "I know." Silence followed each admission. He did not argue context. He did not shift blame. "I thought I was acting responsibly," he said after a moment. "I thought immediate action meant strength." "And did it?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "No, The confrontation was not explosive, it was controlled. She did not insult him. She held him accountable. "You dismissed me," she continued, "while I was carrying your child." The statement landed heavily again. He lowered his gaze. "I cannot undo that," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "You cannot." The lake outside remained still. Nature did not react to human failure. But inside the house, something important was happening. For the first time since the break, he was not defending himself. He was listening. He stood slowly, not out of frustration, out of instinct. Then, without announcement or theatrics, he lowered himself onto one knee in front of her. Not proposing, not performing, just positioning himself below her line of sight. "I was wrong," he said. 3 words, unadorned. He did not reach for her immediately. He did not attempt to touch her. "I let fear make decisions that should have required courage," he continued. "I allowed pride to silence questions I should have asked." She watched him carefully. He looked smaller than she remembered, not physically, emotionally. "I do not deserve immediate forgiveness," he said. "I know that." The humility in his tone felt unfamiliar, but not insincere. "I am not asking you to pretend this didn't happen," he added. "I am asking for the opportunity to earn back what I broke." The distinction mattered. She did not soften instantly. Trust, once fractured, rebuilds slowly. "You can stand," she said quietly. He remained kneeling a second longer before rising. The gesture was not dramatic. It was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement marked the first step toward possible restoration. Serafina agreed to one condition. "If we attempt anything," she said, "we do it with guidance." He accepted immediately. They began attending therapy sessions in the city twice a week. The first session felt uncomfortable. Aurelius was accustomed to control. Here, he was questioned directly. "Why did you assume betrayal?" The therapist asked. "I didn't," he replied instinctively. "Then why did you act without asking?" He paused. "Because I feared losing authority." The admission surprised him. The therapist pressed further. "Authority over whom?" He considered the question carefully. "Over my life. Over perception." Session after session peeled back layers he rarely examined. His upbringing, his obsession with control, his association between vulnerability and weakness. Serafina spoke about feeling dismissed, about the cost of silence, about dignity as protection. There were moments of tension, moments of quiet tears, but no shouting. They addressed patterns rather than personalities. He began recognizing how quickly he defaulted to decision instead of dialogue. Awareness replaced denial. That shift did not erase damage, but it created space for accountability to become practice rather than apology. Outside therapy, conversations continued. One evening at the lakeside house, Serafina described the first ultrasound. "You weren't there," she said simply. He nodded. "I know. I heard the heartbeat alone." He swallowed. "I should have been." She watched him carefully. There was no counter-argument, no explanation, just acknowledgement. He learned to sit with discomfort without correcting it. He allowed her to express anger without redirecting it. He absorbed each truth fully before responding. That was new for him. Listening without defense required discipline, more discipline than negotiating contracts. One afternoon she asked him directly, "Why didn't you trust me enough to ask if I was pregnant?" He answered honestly, "I thought I already knew the outcome." "That wasn't trust," she said. "That was assumption." He accepted it. No argument, no pride. The pattern of immediate resolution was slowly replaced by patience. Redemption does not arrive through grand gestures. It develops through repeated humility. He began showing up consistently. Appointments, sessions, conversations, without expectation, without timeline. Weeks passed. He attended every prenatal appointment moving forward. He learned how to interpret scan images. He asked thoughtful questions. He took notes. He did not assume reinstatement as husband. He earned proximity as partner. One evening, as they stood in the nursery she had prepared, he ran his hand gently along the crib's edge. "You did all of this alone," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "I should have been here." "Yes." There was no cruelty in her tone, only truth. "I don't expect you to forget," he said. I only hope you will eventually believe I have changed. She studied him carefully. Change is proven over time, she answered. He nodded. He understood now that apology was beginning, not conclusion. The lake outside reflected moonlight softly. Inside, tension had softened but not disappeared. Trust would not return overnight. But accountability had replaced arrogance. He no longer sought control. He sought restoration. Whether he would receive it remained uncertain. And that uncertainty was the cost of his earlier certainty. The second coat of paint dried slowly along the nursery wall. Aurelius stood on a small stepladder, rolling soft cream over a section he had missed. Serafina remained near the doorway, sorting folded baby clothes into neat stacks. There was no music playing, no forced conversation, only the quiet sound of the roller moving back and forth. He worked carefully, focused. This was not a task delegated to contractors. It was something he insisted on doing himself. You don't have to reach that corner, she said gently. It's fine. It's not fine, he replied. It should be even. She watched him smooth the paint deliberately, correcting small imperfections. He approached this room differently than boardrooms. There was no rush, no urgency, just attention. When he stepped down from the ladder, he studied the walls critically. It's warmer than the penthouse would have been, he observed. Yes, she answered. I wanted it to feel calm. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. They stood side by side in the nearly finished room, neither touching, yet sharing the space in quiet partnership. The nursery was no longer symbolic. It was preparation, and preparation required presence. He placed the roller into the tray and wiped his hands clean. I'm glad you let me help, he said. I didn't let you, she replied softly. You showed up. The distinction lingered gently between them. That evening, rain returned. Soft at first, then steady. Water traced down the nursery window in thin lines while they cleaned brushes in the kitchen sink. The house felt warmer during storms. The lake beyond blurred under gray skies. Serafina stood near the window, one hand resting at the small of her back. You used to love storms in the city, she said quietly. I liked the way the skyline reflected on wet streets, he replied. And now? He looked around the room. I prefer this. She did not answer immediately. The rain provided a natural rhythm, filling silence without pressure. He stepped closer, but stopped short of touching her. Are you tired? He asked. A little. He pulled out a chair and gestured for her to sit. She accepted. He knelt in front of her. Not in apology this time, but in attentiveness. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore, he said carefully. I'm aware, she replied. There was no hostility in her voice, just caution. The rain intensified briefly against the glass, then softened again. Storms pass. But what they leave behind depends on what was built beforehand. He rested his hand lightly against her knee, waiting for permission in her silence. She did not pull away. Small gestures carried more weight now than grand declarations ever could. Later that night, they returned to the nursery to move the rocking chair closer to the window. As Serafina adjusted its position, she shifted her weight carefully. Without thinking, Aurelius stepped behind her. His hands hovered briefly before resting gently along the curve of her stomach. He moved slowly, giving her space to object. She did not. His palms settled against her growing belly with reverence rather than urgency. The contact felt different than before. This was not possession. It was acknowledgement. He lowered his chin near her shoulder. I can feel how real this is now, he murmured. It's always been real, she replied softly. I know. He stayed there quietly, hands spread protectively across the life he almost overlooked. The baby shifted slightly beneath his touch. Serafina inhaled sharply. Did you feel that? She asked. Yes. The moment was small, but overwhelming. He tightened his embrace slightly, careful not to apply pressure. I missed so much already, he said. You did, she answered. No accusation, just truth. His arms remained around her longer than necessary, not because he feared losing her again, but because holding her felt earned in a way it never had before. Intimacy had shifted from instinct to gratitude, and gratitude softened his pride more than any confrontation could. They sat together on the living room sofa later that night, the rain now reduced to a distant hum. Aurelius leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. The statement carried no self-pity, only recognition. Serafina watched him carefully. "You're right," she said. He nodded. "I broke something foundational," he continued. "Not just trust, respect." She remained silent, allowing him to speak fully. "I assumed, I concluded, I acted without honoring you." Each word was deliberate. He did not rush. "I'm not asking you to erase that," he added. "I'm asking you to observe what I do from now on." The shift in language mattered. Not asking for forgiveness, requesting accountability. She leaned back against the sofa slowly. "You understand that rebuilding doesn't mean returning to what we were," she said. "I know. It means creating something different." He accepted that without hesitation. Different meant slower, more intentional, less driven by ego. He met her eyes steadily. "I'm willing to live with the reminder of what I did," he said. She studied him longer than before. For the first time since the parking structure, she saw consistency replacing impulse. She stood and walked toward the window overlooking the lake. He followed, but kept respectful distance. "I don't offer chances lightly," she said quietly. "I know. You didn't just hurt me, you dismissed me." He absorbed the words without resistance. "I won't dismiss you again," he replied. "That's not a promise you declare," she said. "That's a pattern you demonstrate." He nodded. The lake reflected faint light from the house. "You don't deserve a second chance," she continued. "But you can earn one." The sentence settled with weight. Earn. Not granted. Not assumed. He felt relief, but not triumph. Earning required consistency. Time. Patience. "I will," he said. "Then understand this," she added. "Trust rebuilds through repetition, not speeches." "I understand." There was no dramatic embrace, no immediate resolution, just agreement. He stepped closer slowly, giving her space to step away if she wished. She remained. The distance between them felt narrower than before, not erased, but measured. Maturity does not erase pain. It integrates it into growth. They stood there quietly, watching the lake, aware that something fragile was being reconstructed piece by piece. The moment arrived without announcement. She turned toward him first, not out of impulse, out of consideration. Her gaze moved across his face carefully, searching for traces of arrogance that once defined him. She found none. He looked at her with patience, not urgency. He raised his hand slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "If this is too soon," he said softly, "tell me." She shook her head once. "No." He leaned in gradually, giving her full control of the space between them. Their lips met gently, not desperate, not claiming, measured. The kiss carried memory, but also change. He did not pull her closer aggressively. He allowed the contact to remain balanced. Her hand rested against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath. When they separated, neither rushed to speak. He placed his forehead lightly against hers. "I won't rush us," he said. "I won't either," she replied. The rain had stopped completely. Outside, the lake settled into stillness. Inside, restoration continued quietly. Intimacy returned, not as heat, but as partnership. And partnership, once lost, is rebuilt through presence rather than promise. The call came before sunrise. Serafina's voice remained controlled, but tighter than usual. "It's time." Aurelius was already dressed before the sentence fully registered. He drove faster than he should have, the road toward the private clinic stretching longer than ever before. Inside the labor room, monitors hummed steadily. Medical staff moved with calm efficiency. The air carried sterile precision. Serafina lay propped against pillows, breathing through measured contractions. She did not scream. She focused. He stood beside her, uncertain where to position himself. "Here," she said quietly, extending her hand. He stepped closer immediately. The tension in the room did not feel chaotic. It felt concentrated, focused, purposeful. He watched the monitor display their child's heartbeat, steady and strong. This was no longer abstract. This was consequence becoming life. He felt the weight of months collapse into this moment. He had nearly missed this, nearly forfeited standing here. The realization sharpened his awareness. Every breath she took mattered. Every instruction from the nurse mattered. This was not a boardroom crisis he could manage. This was creation unfolding. And for the first time in years, he had no control over the outcome. Another contraction surged. Serafina gripped his hand tightly, her fingers pressing into his palm with surprising force. He did not pull away. Instead, he adjusted his stance and leaned closer. "I'm here," he said quietly. Her eyes locked onto his. "Stay," she replied through steady breaths. "I'm not going anywhere." He meant it in more ways than one. Each contraction drew him further into the reality of fatherhood. He felt helpless watching her endure pain he could not absorb for her. He wiped perspiration gently from her forehead. The nurse gave calm instructions. "Breathe. Push. Rest." He repeated each directive softly near her ear, grounding himself in her rhythm. Her grip tightened again. He felt the pressure and welcomed it. This was not discomfort to escape. It was participation. The strength in her body humbled him. He realized how much she had carried without him. Now, he held on firmly, allowing her to anchor herself to his presence. Trust rebuilt through action now faced its ultimate test. He would not look away. He would not retreat. He stood steady as she labored. And he understood what partnership truly required. The final moments intensified. Time lost structure. The room narrowed to breath, instruction, effort. Then it happened. A sharp, clear cry pierced the air. Small, strong, undeniable. Aurelius froze for half a second, absorbing the sound. The nurse lifted their son briefly, announcing health indicators with reassuring clarity. Serafina's body relaxed against the pillows, exhaustion and relief blending together. He watched as their child was placed carefully against her chest. Tiny fingers curled instinctively. The crying softened. Aurelius stepped closer, unable to speak immediately. This was life, not strategy, not projection. Life. He had nearly forfeited witnessing this first sound, nearly allowed fear to rewrite his future. The doctor spoke about routine procedures, but his focus remained on the child's face, fragile, perfect, real. He touched his son's hand gently, surprised by how small it felt against his finger. The cry settled into steady breathing. In that moment, everything else diminished in importance. Markets, headlines, expansion plans, all secondary. This was legacy in its purest form. He did not anticipate tears. He prided himself on composure, control, restraint. But when he heard his son's breathing steady and saw Serafina's tired smile, something inside him broke open. He turned slightly away, attempting to regain balance. It failed. Tears fell freely, not from embarrassment, from clarity. "I almost lost everything," he whispered. The words carried no exaggeration, they carried truth. Serafina watched him carefully. "You did," she replied softly. He nodded, unable to deny it. The tears did not weaken him. They grounded him. He understood now that leadership without humility fractures relationships. He had built towers. He had built systems. But here, holding his son's tiny hand, he felt smaller than he ever had in a boardroom, and more complete. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Serafina's forehead. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up entirely." She did not answer immediately. Instead, she focused on the child resting against her chest. He wiped his face quietly, accepting vulnerability as part of growth. Redemption does not erase history. It transforms it. Later, as the room quieted and nurses stepped out, Aurelia sat beside her bed. Their son slept peacefully between them. Serafina looked at him steadily. "Never forget how close you came," she said. The statement was not harsh. It was grounding. He met her gaze without hesitation. "I won't. You almost chose fear permanently," she continued. "You almost let pride define your legacy." He nodded. "I know." She adjusted the blanket gently around the baby. "This child deserves a father who listens before deciding, who asks before assuming." "He will have that," Aurelius replied firmly. "Then remember this feeling," she said. "Remember what nearly slipped away. He placed his hand carefully over theirs. "I will carry that reminder," he said. "Not as guilt, as guidance." Her warning was not punishment. It was protection, a safeguard against repeating the same mistake. He understood that redemption requires memory. Forgetting invites repetition, and repetition would cost him more than he could bear. Within weeks of returning to the city, Aurelius began restructuring his executive team. He delegated operational control more intentionally. He promoted leaders capable of managing expansion without his constant presence. Board members noticed the shift. "You're stepping back?" one asked. "I'm stepping smarter," he replied. He reduced unnecessary meetings, consolidated travel schedules, created clearer reporting channels to avoid micromanagement. Control was no longer his primary objective. Balance was. He implemented policies encouraging family leave and flexible scheduling for senior leadership. Performance would not require personal sacrifice at the cost he once assumed necessary. He spoke candidly during a leadership retreat. "Growth without stability fractures from within," he said. The statement carried personal weight. His company had mirrored his internal state before. Driven, impatient. Now he emphasized sustainability, longevity, presence. He was no longer chasing expansion to outrun insecurity. He was building structure that allowed space for life beyond office walls. His team adjusted. Some questioned the pace change. He remained steady. Success did not diminish. It matured. He established new boundaries deliberately. No meetings past 7 p.m. unless critical. No international travel exceeding 3 consecutive days without return. Family dinners prioritized. Assistants adjusted calendars accordingly. He informed investors personally of his new scheduling structure. "This will not impact performance," he assured them. "It will strengthen it." He understood something clearly now. Exhaustion does not equal excellence. Presence fuels clarity. He no longer answered calls during moments that belonged to his son. He silenced devices during bedtime routines. He sat in the rocking chair inside the nursery, learning how to soothe small cries without impatience. Boundaries were not restrictions. They were declarations of value. He valued family. He valued stability. He valued listening before reacting. Serafina observed the consistency carefully. He did not announce these changes publicly for applause. He practiced them quietly. Consistency rebuilds credibility, not speeches. And credibility, once lost, requires evidence. The corporate jet remained available, but its usage declined significantly. Instead of traveling to close every deal personally, Aurelius empowered regional leaders to finalize negotiations. He attended only essential engagements. When travel became unavoidable, he returned promptly. The lakeside house remained active. Weekends there became sacred. He learned the rhythm of the water, the quiet mornings, the steady pace of family life. He no longer equated presence with weakness. He understood that absence creates emotional distance long before physical separation becomes visible. He carried that lesson into every decision. Each flight he declined represented a deliberate choice. He was not shrinking his ambition. He was redefining it. Success no longer meant constant visibility. It meant sustainable impact. And sustainable impact began at home. Serafina noticed the reduction in travel not because he told her, but because he arrived home consistently. Trust rebuilt through repetition. He honored that. One evening, months after their son's birth, Aurelius stood in the nursery again. This time the crib was occupied. Soft breathing filled the room. Serafina entered quietly behind him. "You've changed," she said. He did not turn immediately. "I had to." "No," she replied gently. "You chose to." He faced her. "Yes," he admitted. "I chose differently." He no longer chased validation through dominance. He no longer confused decisiveness with wisdom. He learned to ask questions before drawing conclusions. He learned to listen before reacting. He learned that legacy is not measured by structures bearing your name. It is measured by the lives you protect. He placed his hand lightly on the crib's edge. "I won't forget how close I came to losing this," he said. Serafina stepped beside him. "Then we move forward," she replied, not as if the past vanished, but as if it informed the future. Redemption was not granted in a single moment. It was built daily. And this time, he chose family over ego. Pride rarely announces itself with noise. It does not always shout. It often stands tall, calm, and certain. It convinces you that decisiveness equals strength. It tells you that hesitation is weakness. Aurelius believed he was protecting his image. He believed firmness made him admirable. Yet pride does not break relationships through chaos. It breaks them through certainty without conversation. It isolates you inside your own conclusions. It convinces you that you already know enough. And in that quiet confidence, it begins to dismantle what took years to build. Fear does not always look like panic. Sometimes it looks responsible. It sounds rational. It presents itself as maturity. Aurelius told himself he was doing the right thing. He framed his decision as accountability. But responsibility without truth becomes avoidance. When fear leads, questions go unasked. Assumptions replace dialogue. Control replaces trust. The danger is not fear itself. The danger is acting from fear while calling it leadership. If you do not examine your motives, you risk protecting your ego while sacrificing what truly matters. Legacy is not measured in square footage or market value. It is measured in how you treat the people closest to you when no one is watching. Aurelius built towers that touched the skyline, yet the most important structure in his life was the one he nearly abandoned. Character defines legacy, not status, not reputation. Character is revealed when you are confronted with discomfort. It shows in whether you listen before reacting, whether you admit fault without excuses, whether you protect love with the same intensity you protect ambition. Serafina demonstrated that dignity is strength. She did not scream. She did not compete. She walked away with composure. True strength does not beg for validation. It protects self-respect even in pain. And redemption does not arrive through apology alone. It requires consistency. It demands humility repeated over time. Aurelius did not regain trust with one kneeling moment. He rebuilt it through presence, through listening, through changed behavior. Redemption is not spoken. It is demonstrated daily. Second chances are not automatic. They are not owed. They are earned. Some people never receive them. Some refuse to offer them. The question is not whether mistakes happen. The question is whether growth follows. Do you believe people can change when faced with truth? Do you believe love can survive pride if humility replaces it? I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me if you believe in second chances. Share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Twisted Love Tales with Mr. Easton for more stories that challenge the heart and strengthen the mind.